Since 2019, all prices in Canada rose, on average, by 18%, food prices by 27%, egg prices by 37%. Why exactly did this happen? What contributed to this? And more importantly, what will happen to the prices in the future? I've read over a dozen reports and studies, downloaded over 100 megabytes of data, and even dusted off my old Master of Finance textbook. And now I think I have a pretty good idea of what exactly happened. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. Everybody has political biases, I'll just show mine up front. That said, I want to focus this video on evidence from reports, studies, and data. So, why did the prices rise? And specifically, let's take a look at the food prices because they rose 28%, making up a large chunk of inflation. But before we get to the actual main reason why the prices increased, let's take a look at a few things that are frequently discussed but are not the main contributors to the price increases. First of all, greedflation, or when the grocery stores use the opportunity to bump up the price of each individual item to make more profit, is a real thing. If you take a look at the financial statements of the various grocery stores in Canada, they did make more profit per item. That said, it's not a lot more profit. Altogether, it contributed maybe about 2% to the increase in prices. If you want to dig more into this but don't want to read the individual financial statements, there's a great video by a YouTuber named The Plain Bagel that goes into a lot more detail. Or if you prefer something to read, there is a report from Statistics Canada that says basically the same thing. Next is the weakening Canadian dollar. Since 2019, Canadian dollar has gone up and down relative to US dollar, but mostly down. Now, in Canada, we import about a third of the food that we eat, about half of it coming from United States, and the rest mostly traded in United States dollars as well. And doing the math, that translates to an increase in food prices on average by about 2% as well. Next, the carbon tax. Given the political controversy surrounding the carbon tax, you would think that it had a large impact on food prices. But now there have been several studies on the topic, including one from Bank of Canada, which was admittedly rather simplistic, and a much more detailed one from a couple of professors at the University of Calgary. And the ultimate verdict was that the carbon tax has increased the food prices by less than 1%. So, if these were not the main causes of inflation, then what was? Well, according to several studies and reports, it all originally started during COVID, when the amount of stuff being made declined, but the amount of money available to buy stuff didn't. To see how that happened, let's take a look at a simplified model of Canadian economy in 2019, where there is some amount of products being made and there is some amount of money available to people to buy these products. Then 2020 happens. Some businesses shut down and others implement social distancing and other safety measures that save lives, but at the same time lead to reduced production. Now, if everybody's incomes would have been also reduced by the same amount, then the prices would have stayed stable. But government realized that some people who have been laid off would no longer be able to pay rent or buy food. So it started sending out COVID support payments. And the Bank of Canada, in order to support businesses, reduced the interest rates, which had an effect of also increasing the amount of money available. So we had the same amount of money chasing fewer products, which resulted in the prices going up. And for food specifically, to make matters worse, in 2022 the war in Ukraine started, Ukraine being one of the biggest global exporters of various food commodities. Normally at this point, the Bank of Canada would step in and try to control the inflation by raising the interest rates. And usually it's pretty good at this. In fact, since it started trying to directly control the inflation in 1991, it kept the inflation pretty much exactly where it wanted. But this time, because of COVID, it was a bit too slow to react, and so by the time it did, something a bit more dangerous started setting in. Businesses that were facing higher costs started passing those costs on to consumers. And because of that, employees started to demand higher wages. That resulted in even higher costs for businesses, and so on and so on. And that is what turned an initial temporary bump in prices into a widespread multi-year period of inflation. And this happened not just in Canada, but also in many other countries, including United States, United Kingdom, and the Eurozone. So that's why the prices increased. So, what will happen next? The good news is that the Bank of Canada eventually did exactly what it was supposed to do, which was raise the interest rates aggressively, which slowed down the economy, and that slowed down the inflation. The bad news is that whatever price increases have happened are here to stay. That's because the Bank of Canada prefers to keep the inflation slow but steady at about 2% per year. It says so right on their website. Now, why the economists, including ones that run Bank of Canada, are really afraid of broad economy-wide price decreases is another interesting topic, and maybe I'll make another video about that. But the end result is that the prices are just not going to come down. That said, there are a couple of other things to keep in mind. First of them are the Trump tariffs. United States placing tariffs on Canadian goods will result in higher prices for Americans, but here in Canada it will likely have the opposite effect. Businesses selling to the United States will struggle more, and that will slow down the Canadian economy and will slow down the increase in prices, at least temporarily. The second thing to consider is that there are a number of things that the provincial and federal governments can do in the medium term to lower prices in some specific areas. There are a number of industries in Canada that have been protected from foreign competition. Opening up these industries will make the existing companies compete with foreign companies that may want to enter Canada. At the same time, relaxing how much foreigners can invest into these industries in Canada will allow Canadian companies to raise more money from abroad so that they can invest more into productivity so that when they lower their prices, they can still remain competitive. And that's about it. If you want me to cover any other topics, let me know in the comments. And like, subscribe, the usual. See you next time!